This is the first time I've actually done a Zoom to Zoom session for students, so hopefully it all goes well. So the way that I'm hoping to run today's session is I've got a presentation that I'll have a chat with you about. Also, there'll be some questions that I'd like you to consider and potentially write some responses to in the chat function as well. We've got you all on mute for the time being. So in terms of questions, if you can type them as we go into the comment section, and we've got a moderator, Jamie Jones, who's another one of me. So he's a career development and learning advisor as well. So in terms of any questions that you may have, he might be able to answer them, but also I can go through those questions at the very end before I conclude the session, and hopefully give you the answers that you're looking for. We might give it a couple of more minutes, because I do appreciate, since we've started doing these sessions, it takes a few people to get online. It takes them a bit of a few moments to get themselves sorted. So I won't start just yet, but I'll get my share screen up and then we'll take it from there. All right, we might as well get a start. I think we had about 40 register via Student Hub, and I appreciate things change over the couple of days since people have registered. So I appreciate today's session is only going to go for an hour, so I'll get started now. Now, thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate that we are working in unprecedented times. So doing these Zoom sessions, I'm sure many of us are spending plenty of time in front of a computer screen over the last couple of weeks, with pretty much everything that the university offers now offered online or through Zoom. So in terms of what we're going to discuss today, so engaging with employers, obviously for international students. So it's one of those things that I think, given the situation that we find ourselves in, we are spending a lot of time at home and a lot of time online. So regarding networking and getting in touch with industry, I'm going to focus mostly on strategies to assist you right now, because in terms of gaining insights from employers in person or face-to-face, those opportunities are very rare and are probably not going to start occurring for some time in the future. So I'll focus predominantly on online networking. And if you do have any other questions, like I said, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we can get to them as we go through the session. And I might do a big bulk of answering questions at the very end as well. So in terms of the first exercise I want you to do, so there's three questions there. So why you studied in your area? What do you like most about your study area? And what worries you about finding a job? Now, in terms of how we're going to run today, I'd actually really like you to maybe spend the first maybe minute or two and maybe answer those questions in the chat. So it's a bit of a brief introduction to yourselves. So why you studied in your area, obviously you'll need to outline what you're studying at university, and then also what you like most about it, but also what worries you about finding a job. So if you can start maybe introducing yourselves and entering that into the chat, that would be brilliant. All right, thanks, Patrick. Anyone else want to share why they chose their study area and I guess what worries them about finding a job? Yep, thanks, Sid. Yep, perfect. Thanks, Theodore. And I appreciate some of you are also getting to that and typing away. But I think the reason I get everyone to do that, and I do that in pretty much every single one of the workshops that I do run, it's really important to know why you're doing what you're doing. And I think without having that engagement with your passion area and really engaging with what motivates you and what drives you in your study and your pursuit of whatever profession that you're going for, it's really hard to market and sell yourself to industry. And I think that's where a lot of people tend to struggle because we don't see ourselves as marketers unless we're doing a marketing degree. But when it comes time to actually look for work, that's exactly what you're doing. And employers really are going to want to know why you're doing what you're doing, what you're passionate about, and I guess what passion you're going to bring to the workplace as well. Um, so I think that getting in touch with that as soon as possible and definitely before 2 months before your graduation is really, really important because it's going to be a major factor in you being able to secure your first role. And also, I know that today we're discussing networking, but when you're actually meeting people, so knowing your motivations, knowing what you're passionate about is going to make opening up conversations with employers a lot more easy for you and allow conversation to flow. So in terms of employability at UQ, there's a question there that I want you to consider. So imagine you're an employer and you have two final year students interviewing for the same grad role. They both have the exact same degree, and like you all have GPAs straight sevens. I'm sure you do. But how would you choose between the two? Knowing that they have the same degree from the same university, what other things would you want to consider before you start handing out jobs? So for the next couple of minutes, I want you to think about yourself from a HR perspective or a recruitment perspective. What other things as you as an employer would you want to know about that person? So if you could just type them down into the chat, that would be fantastic. Good. Previous work experience. Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, the type of visa, definitely. Whether they've got working rights and what restrictions that may have. Yep, sure. Soft skills. So, Queenie, would you be able to maybe expand on that a little bit in terms of soft skills? What sorts of things? Good. Yep, leadership, different software use, good fit for the business. So I guess we refer to that as cultural fit. Yep, good. Also, yeah, I've just noticed there the better communication skills, and I think that's what today is mainly going to focus on as well. It's one of those things that your competence in a role, quite often, particularly in an Australian context, is deemed on your ability to communicate. So if you're not a strong communicator, people will actually doubt your competence in being able to do your job. And I think that's even more evident now, particularly when we have to constantly market ourselves to industry. People that can't confidently engage with industry and talk about themselves and those sorts of things, it really doesn't bode well for your ability to market yourself and gain those roles. So communication is incredibly important, and it's one of those things that it's not a natural skill that a lot of people are just born with. The communication, particularly in a workplace context, is something that's learned, and you can't actually develop those skills unless you're actually engaging in those experiences as well. So you'll hear me say a couple of times today that you need to be looking at other opportunities to develop those skills. So why is employability important? Yes, because your degree alone doesn't make you employable. And I think for some students, that's a very hard lesson to learn because they focused incredibly hard on getting straight sevens in all their degrees, but however, have neglected developing themselves in other areas. So in terms of that, I mean, looking at other opportunities, volunteering, getting involved in student clubs and societies. Obviously, the discipline knowledge is really important, but I guess what differentiates you from the people sitting next to you in class is you are the sum of all of your experiences. So some have had limited experience and some have gone out into the community and industry and done so much that they already come, even though they're maybe 21, 22. Oh, you can't hear me? Can everyone else hear me? Yep. Okay. There might be an issue with your volume, so maybe have a look at that. But the way that you differentiate yourself is you. What has made you you? What experiences have you engaged with? What not just volunteering work, but are you working? Are you holding a part-time job? I know now that's even more difficult because I know a lot of the typical uni jobs that students are doing have closed for the time being until some of those businesses reopen and are able to offer their services again. One of the key things about that is being able to articulate those skills and those experiences to industry. A lot of us have actually done quite a lot in our lifetimes, but been able to package that in a way that employers can understand and appreciate is, I guess, one of those things that many of us have to learn. And being able to market our skills and what we have to offer is not something, again, that we do naturally. I think the human race as a whole, we tend to focus on what we don't do well rather than what we do well. So quite often in my workshops, I'll get students to write down, what they're good at. And it takes them 10 minutes to come up with maybe 4 things. But when I say, what are you not good at? You're writing a list a mile long, and I pretty much have to stop. So in terms of that, what have those experiences given you? What have you gained from those experiences? And what does that mean to the industry that you're going into or wanting to move into as well? So that being able to articulate yourself and communicate is really, really important. So this is something that I don't want you to have to physically write in the chat section, but definitely have a think about it. So think about a time you've been pushed outside your comfort zone or you've faced a fairly significant or big challenge. And I want you to think about what you learned about yourself in that process. So what can you do differently having been through that situation, through that experience? Now, if you haven't had any practical experience or work experience or an internship, I want you to think about other areas of your life where you may have had quite a significant challenge, and I guess how you overcame that and what you learn about yourself in that process. I'll give you a couple of minutes just to quickly think about that, and then I'll chat about, I guess, why I've asked you to do that. Also, I've got there some travel stories. We all have hideous or difficult travel stories. I know I've had plenty. And one of the reasons I'm actually getting you to do this is, I guess, it's a challenge or you'll feel uncomfortable or you feel outside your comfort zone because it's either hitting a weakness or it's a new experience. And I think when you're going through those experiences, it's very easy to kind of shy away and never try that experience again because it was negative. But in terms of looking at those challenges, it's really important that we start reflective practice now. And I know a lot of you do reflections as part of your study. Those of you that don't, or that you are out in industry and you don't sit back every week and say, well, what did I learn this week and what does that mean for my profession? You need to start doing that now, because being able to appreciate what you come to industry with and what you have to offer only comes through that professional reflection and maybe looking at what you have to offer as well. And generally speaking, those that don't consistently or continually try to challenge themselves, you don't progress. So you stagnate. And an employer is always going to want to look for someone that is constantly looking for challenge or looking to develop themselves, because someone that is looking to develop themselves will always develop an industry or develop in a workplace as well and be innovative and look at different ways of doing things. So whatever challenge or thing that you are considering now, I want you to maybe flesh that out a bit. What happened? Why was it uncomfortable? What did you do? What strategies would you have put in place to overcome that? And I guess what can you do now, having lived through or been through that experience? All right. Now, this is where I want some of your engagement, please. So what do you think employers are looking for in graduates? So maybe give me your top 10, what you think employers are looking for. Good. Communication, teamwork skills. Yep. Cultural fit. Good. Adaptability, particularly in a time like now, being flexible. Yep. Yeah, willingness to learn is hugely important. Definitely being able to throw ourselves into new situations, and also having the ability to accept feedback. Obviously, enterprise skills. Yep, good. Yeah, and I think I'll pick up on that demonstrated skills, and I think that's something that um, needs a lot more consideration when many people are going for jobs. So quite often it's very easy to say, I have this skill, I have this skill, but I need to know as an employer how you've demonstrated it. It's no use telling me what skill you have unless you can give me an example of how and when you've demonstrated that. So yeah, that's good. Now, for those of you that have provided some skills there, how have you come to that conclusion that those are the skills that are looking for? Is it an educated guess, or is it through industry knowledge and understanding, or is it through conversations you've had with industry, or is it just a bit of a random guess? Please be honest. Real life example. Yeah, good. Yep. So yeah, the situational questions. Yep, previous conversations and knowledge from work experience. Yep, good. So just as a general rule, and this is an overall from all industries. So so employers are looking for self-motivated and eager to take on new challenges. They're looking at people that want to be innovative, strategic, definitely comfortable building relationships, and not being a wallflower and shying away from social situations. Being dynamic and being able to change and pick up different roles and responsibilities when required. Definitely being a team player, communication and interpersonal skills. And I think without that, most roles you're going to struggle. So being able to succinctly, but also confidently and competently communicate with others. Um, an ability to take direction and learn, I think, is probably one of the big ones. Now, in terms of the reason I got asked that question is it's very easy to think um, just rattling off a whole heap of skills that you feel industry are looking for. It's really important to actually get out there and chat to industry representatives, whether they be new graduates, employers, business owners in the area that you're wanting to go into, um, is is really really important. So quite often we assume what skills are actually expected. However, when you actually speak to industry, you may be surprised as to what sorts of things they're actually looking for. So it's really important that you are getting out there, asking questions of industry and engaging with them as much as possible. Yeah, how to communicate effectively if English is not our first language. Yeah, and again, I think that's for the cohort of this session today. Obviously, you're all international students, and that can be a really daunting task. And I guess as a native English speaker, it's very easy for me to say. But in terms of how to get better at that, you've got to push yourself into those situations. And I think if you are reluctant to do that, your communication, your cultural understanding is going to be limited or stunted. So that's why particularly for international students, but all students in general, I really encourage doing any kind of volunteer work and something that's going to force you into either team environments, but also, problem solving within a group and that sort of thing. I think that's hugely important. And I'll talk about that a bit later on as to the ways that international students or students in general can actually throw themselves into situations like that are not only benefiting an organization, but are also encouraging you and helping you build your cultural understanding of the way business works in Australia, and just your own confidence in doing that as well. So I think, yeah, I'm very conscious that for international students, gaining that is can be difficult and also quite a daunting task, particularly if you're very, very new to the country and you've only just arrived. So in terms of networking, without cheating and looking at the words that I've already got there, what comes to mind, or what's one word that comes to mind for you when you hear the word networking? Good communication. Yep, actively engaging with employers. Yep, attending careers fairs. Yep, we're doing a virtual one, which I'm going to get Jamie to have a bit of. Actually, no, we're still trying to put that together. So we're doing an online careers fair either next week or the week after, but we're still trying to finalise that. Putting yourself out there, good socialisation, building meaningful relationships, potential job opportunities. Yep, for sure. So in terms of that, when I've actually done that and it's quite interesting to see, all of your responses are reasonably positive. And what I have seen historically is when I ask students what they think about networking, a lot of it's reasonably negative. So it's daunting, it's uncomfortable, it's suit and tie at events, and having a few networking drinks and those sorts of things. And I appreciate that the in-person networking can be quite intimidating. Um, and for me, it's not something that comes to me naturally as well. It's one of those things that even now, having done it for many, many years, it's something that sometimes I really have to push myself to go to those networking events and push myself out there. But there's, like Peter's just said, so LinkedIn, and that's really what I'm going to focus on today, about how to make the most of your LinkedIn, how to engage and what the expectations are around engaging with employers on LinkedIn. I think in networking, yes, it's trying to engage with industry. It should not be about job search. Networking and job search are two completely different things. So, and I think that's where I see a lot of students come undone, because their networking is contacting someone on LinkedIn saying, I'm about to graduate, can I have a job? Or how do I get a job at your organization? And obviously you don't know them, they don't know you. So there is absolutely no reason for them to offer you advice on how to get a job with them, or for them to give you a job. So it's one of those things that with networking, there's a saying, you need to dig the well before you are thirsty. So you should be doing it well and truly before graduation. Because if you're starting to network 2 or 3 weeks or a month before you graduate, employees are going to know that you're desperate, and they're going to know why that you're contacting them, and they could be a little bit suspicious of your motivation. So networking shouldn't just be about job search. It should be about building that industry understanding, knowing how particular companies or organizations tick and how they work. And that's why it should be done well and truly in advance before you're graduating. Now, what I want you to do now, there's those 3 questions there. So technically at the end of this exercise, you need to have 9 things. So 3 companies, I want you to name 3 companies or organizations employing people like you, so with your degree. I want you to name 3 job titles people in your field may have, or people with your degree may have. And then I want you to name 3 people in industry. You could ask industry specific questions right now. So you have them in your phone. You could leave this chat now and go and get on the phone and have a conversation with them. So you don't have to put this in the chat, but I at least want you to think about writing down, or maybe in a Word document, have those 3 things written down. So I'll give you maybe 30 seconds just to think about that, and then we'll have a bit of a chat. So can I just get an understanding of just like a show of hands, how many were able to quickly come up with 3 companies? So let me know. So yes or no? So were you able to come up with 3 different job titles? Good. Okay, we've got 3 yeses. That's good. Did anyone struggle with the third one? Who doesn't have, and say me, who doesn't have 3 industry contacts in their phone? Okay, there's a couple of me's there that don't have the industry contacts, and that's generally what many students struggle with. So that last question, we all know what companies are employing potentially. We all may know what different job titles we could possibly go into when we graduate, but it's that final question, and I think it's really important that before you graduate, you have at least 3 people in your phones. So they could be mentors, they could be people that you've met at events, they could be academics, whatever. Um, and unless you're actually going out and actively trying to meet those people, those phone numbers are not going to randomly appear in your contacts list. So I think that networking is really, really important. And it's something that I really want you to focus on while we are all in almost self-quarantine at the moment. I want you to make this your goal. I want you, by the end of the government restrictions and we're back at university face to face, I want you to try and have 3 people within your phones by the time you come back to university. And that's what we're going to talk about, Larry. So we're about to jump into it. So how to get started? First of all, you need to have a good resume. You need to know what you have to offer. We can't go and present ourselves to industry or start engaging with industry reps unless we know what we've done, what we've got to offer, and what our strengths are, and what things we're wanting to develop more of. So first of all, we've got services at UQ, and now that we are all having to work from home, most faculties will have a person like myself. I'm working in health and behavioural sciences. We'll have a person like me that will do online appointments. So if you do need any assistance with resumes, you can book in appointments for that. We also have a whole heap of different advice and handouts and information on Student Hub as well, in terms of how to make your CV and update your CV. Also identify what sort of opportunities you want to seek. There's no point going out to random people in industry if you're not really sure what roles you're looking for. One of the biggest strategies, and it seems very simple because it is a very simple strategy, I want you to go, or actually, who does not have LinkedIn? If you don't have LinkedIn, please start one now. It's something that you can do while you're at home, and there's those links down the bottom as well to help you get the most out of your LinkedIn profiles and how to set them up. Um, LinkedIn is one of those things now, because it's incredibly big business. LinkedIn themselves are now starting to generate their own resources on how to build and make the best use of your LinkedIn profile. I'd really encourage you. There's a cohort of students that I was working with last year, and you can actually upload a video introduction to yourself. That's really good for a number of different reasons. A, they get to know your communication style. They get to know a bit about your personality. and how you communicate. And generally speaking, we want to connect with people, and we want to see their faces. So I think it's really important that making use of all the functionality within LinkedIn, that you are making sure that you're doing that as well. So there's those links down at the bottom that I'd encourage you to look at first. And then just through your own Google searching, there's heaps of YouTube videos as well as to how to set up and different strategies for LinkedIn usage as well. But I'm going to give you some of the things that have worked for me in the past as well. Now, in terms of when you're on, we'll go back. In terms of what opportunities, a way to do that is a lot of students have, I guess, tunnel vision. So they're doing their degree and they're going to be an accountant because they're doing economics or finance or accounting or whatever. They want to be an accountant, but they're completely unaware of the other opportunities that are available to them with the degree that they've got. So what I encourage everyone to do is jump onto LinkedIn, type in the name of your degree and then also Brisbane. And what that will do will give you a list of potentially thousands of people that have done your degree, what role they're currently doing, and what company they're actually working with. So you get a full list of employers that are local to Brisbane that are employing people like you. That allows you to potentially pinpoint people of interest. It's time consuming because you'll need to go through people's profiles and have a look at what they're doing, what their background is, how long they've been in industry, and then you can get an understanding of whether you want to connect with them or not, or why you want to connect with them as well. So in terms of beginning to approach people, I think that's where a lot of people feel quite unsure, particularly international students, because, getting an understanding of what's an appropriate way to connect with someone, what should you do, what shouldn't you do, it's really what works best for you. The way that I approach people is a reasonably casual way. I'm not very formal with the language that I use. I'm quite personable in terms of my initial message to them. And I'll give you an example of how you could potentially reach out to people via LinkedIn as well. And look, LinkedIn, you're going to be unsuccessful. People will ignore you. You're not going to get a response from every single person that you try and connect with, but it's more about your key message that you want to relay to them. So when you're actually adding people on LinkedIn, I would discourage you from doing what many people do on Instagram and Facebook, is just try and add as many people as possible. That's not going to work. What I'd encourage you to do is focus in on key people. And then when you send them a LinkedIn request to connect with you, there's a section there where you can actually put in a message to them. So it's very brief. I can't remember what the character count is, but it's reasonably short. You need to create impact in that really short space. I think it might be 50 characters or 50 words. I can't remember off the top of my head. But in terms of that, you need to be clear on why you're wanting to connect with them. And the more you do it, the more fish you're going to catch. So don't get too disheartened when you get rejected or ignored by your first 3 or 4 people, because that's going to happen. But it's more just continually doing that and mastering your approach. So practice makes perfect with all things. This is definitely one of them. So how do I approach a contact? So this is something that I wouldn't encourage you just to cut and paste, but this is the type of language that I would use. Because you are a student, they're not expecting you to be completely up to speed and being incredibly professional with your approach. They're wanting you to, and I would suggest that you actually use your student status to your advantage, because you're not expected to be an expert. So do a bit of a search, find a couple of key people you really want to connect with. If they've connected with you, your first response to them should be something similar here. So you've done some research, you've stumbled across their profiles, some of their experience looks really interesting. You'd love to have a chat with them a bit further. Be bold. I'm one of these believers in, if you do not ask, you do not get. So I would be bold and say, look, if you do have some spare time, I appreciate we're all working from home. Do you have a spare 5, 10, 15 minutes just to have a bit of a chat? Got a whole heap of questions I'd like to ask you about industry. But make sure you actually have questions as well. And that's where our help can come in as well. We can actually help you formulate some really baseline questions that you may want to ask. I know when I've done networking or cold calling on the phone, it's that initial panic when you get them on the phone. You're like, oh, okay, they've answered. Now what do I say? So it's always good to have a few baseline questions that you can ask straight up front to get the conversation going, and to start creating that engagement from the person on the other end of the telephone. So in terms of that targeted networking, once you've found those people, they are the best advocates for you and providing other contacts as well. So whenever I've spoken to someone that I think has added a lot of value to my understanding, or I've been to a networking event, or I've had a really good quality conversation with them, I always say something like, look, thanks very much for your time. Is there anyone else that you think I should be getting in contact with? Or do you have anyone else that you feel would be able to provide me any more assistance? I'm really looking for some good quality mentors. So if you could introduce me to somebody or a few people, that would be amazing. Again, if you don't ask, you do not get. So always keep them in the loop as well. So if they may have said, there's an amazing website I'd encourage you to have a look at, go have a look at that website and let them know that you've looked at it. Thank you very much for thank them for their advice. It's a good way to keep that relationship going, because I think that's where a lot of us struggle, where we get them on the line, we have that initial conversation, and then you're like, well, then what? What do we do? How do I keep this link going so it doesn't become stale? That constant engagement and sharing things is really, really important. So that said, LinkedIn is like any other social media. You get out what you put in. If you set one up and just let it sit there, it's not going to be helpful to you. So I'd really encourage you to start commenting, start sharing things online. Make sure that's not political or religiously motivated. You need to keep it more professional. So join your professional associations, start following them, because generally it's can be almost being on an emailing list. So you get to find out if there's any local professional development opportunities. People share, insights from other opportunities that they've had. So it's good to comment on them and ask them questions. So like any social media, if you're not engaging with other people or putting out content, people aren't just going to stumble across you on LinkedIn and start offering you jobs. And the reason I think LinkedIn is really important, and particularly social media branding, is this thing called professional brand. And I think it's increasingly important in the modern world is having your own professional brand and your own professional narrative, because like Jeff said from Amazon, your brand is what other people say about you say about you when you're not in the room. And I think that's something that you can control. So those of you that may have had professional experience already, or those of you that are going out on student placements or looking for your own placements, through your own conduct and what you offer an organization, what they say about you will follow you from here on into your professional experience or your jobs as well. They are your best advocates. So in terms of what they say about you when you're not in the room, are you a team player? Do you get the job done? Are you an ideas person? They're all the sorts of things that you want a reference to say about you when you're actually going for a job. So why is this professional branding incredibly important? And there's something that I call the new economy. So the new economy is we no longer graduate university, go into one job, and then retire 45 years later. We're constantly moving jobs. In Australia, I know the statistics are, I think it's every 2.5 to 3 years, we're looking to either upskill or change our career. And we can have up to, I think, the stats are 5 different careers in a lifetime. So the whole idea of a new economy is we need to constantly be selling ourselves. So we need to have something to offer. We need a package. So the new economy means that you need to be a package. You need to be branding yourself. Now, in terms of ownership, the reason I say that is you get to own what is up there about you. So in terms of your LinkedIn, You know, you control that. You can put up whatever you would like about yourself to help build your brand. It's not about like it used to be before social media took over, where the only mention that you may be an expert in that particular area is you may have been mentioned in a company newsletter or something like that. So we are now actively able to sell ourselves rather than expecting our employers to publish things about us. Now, the good thing about, there's a good thing and a bad thing about professional branding, because you can be you can create yourself as an expert status without necessarily being an expert in that area. And there's many times where people have potentially oversold their skills and created an air of expertise when they don't necessarily have expertise in that area, just because they're amazing self-marketers. And we see that all the time on social media, through Instagram and all those sorts of things. Those that are amazing self-marketers can actually sell themselves as an expert in an area where they're not necessarily an expert. So I would encourage you to use your abilities for good and not evil, and make sure that you are selling your skills and not necessarily yourself as an expert where you're not necessarily. But also with the ability to self-brand and create your own professional brand is that differentiation. And we're all looking to differentiate ourselves from the person sitting next to us. And through the way that we portray ourselves at networking events or online or through LinkedIn, that's what makes us different from the people sitting next to us. So it goes back to my initial conversation with you at the start. You are a sum of all your experiences, and that's what makes you different and how you've learned and developed from those experiences. So branding experts. So a person by the name of Jane Anderson, I actually saw her speak a couple of months ago, or maybe a year or so ago. According to US labor data, by the end of this year, 50% of the workforce will be self-employed. So the ability to market and sell yourself is an essential skill for the future workforce. Now, in terms of that 50%, I'm not sure how coronavirus may have impacted that, but definitely people are going for more short-term project-based work. They may be employed in short-term contracts. So that ability to market yourself and sell yourself is really, really important. I'd encourage you to have a look at Jane's website. She is an Australian woman that I saw talk a couple of months ago, last year, and was really interesting. And she puts out a lot of good quality videos and information about, you know, being an excellent self-marketer. Now, in terms of creating a professional narrative, and I think this goes into what I originally got you to do at the very, very start when you were introducing yourself. So why you studied what you did, why it's important to, or why you're wanting to go into a particular area, why are you passionate about, what some of the experiences that have really for you made you realize that you've made the right study choice. Now, in terms of that, with creating that narrative, we as humans, we love stories. So being able to create your own story, that's what makes you memorable. And it's that tell me about yourself question that you will get asked at an interview that will actually create impact. It won't be the quality of your answer to a specific technical problem, but it will be that initial, what vibe or what impression do you give when they say at the start of an interview, so tell us about yourself. So the reason that we have passed on, and I guess before we're able to record anything electronically, we focused on stories throughout history to get people involved and engaged. We love stories, and that's what we engage with, which is why obviously Netflix is going absolutely crazy at the moment, because we like stories. We want to listen to that, and that's what we find engaging. So having a good story and having some experiences to help strengthen your story and your mission is hugely important when it comes to selling yourself to industry, but also in that networking. One of the ultimate levelers when you're networking with industry is sharing some of your experiences. So having some of them under your belt and having some of your key learnings and experiences and maybe your most memorable moments, maybe from placements or experiences or your study is really, really important, because they're an ultimate leveler. We like to share our experiences, and if we aren't able to do that confidently when we're dealing with industry, the conversation becomes very one-sided. It's all about the employer rather than sharing some of yourself as well. So in terms of that, I want you to consider this question here, because you should have an answer to this. Now, given the fact that you're all studying with the ideal that you will be working in an industry in the not too distant future, I can almost guarantee that tell me about yourself question will be the first question that you get asked in an interview, no matter whether you are a network engineer or a nurse. That tell me about yourself question will be the first question you're asked. And it's one of those things, if you can't competently and confidently talk about yourself, an employer is going to start second guessing whether you may be competent in the job. Because like I said at the very beginning, being able to communicate is the employer is going to judge your competence on your ability to communicate. So if you can't communicate yourself and your motivations and passions and who you are, they can't expect you to do the job. So I really want you, and if you haven't thought about this yet, I would start and make sure that you've got a good solid answer to that question, because it is the first question in an interview or when you meet someone in industry and when you are networking. That creates impact and they will remember you. And you need to be memorable. And that's what, after the interview, when they're looking through all the people that they may have interviewed or where they're starting to shortlist for a job, it's not necessarily, like I said earlier, your GPA. It's that person that had that amazing experience at PwC where they were able to be involved in this, this, and this, and this. And that's the sort of things that an employer is going to stick with and remember. So in terms of, I guess, the content for today, that's pretty much what I wanted to get you thinking about. If you haven't started LinkedIn or haven't created a LinkedIn profile, please do so. From here on in, you can actually book in for appointments, and we can actually, it's really difficult to teach you as a group as to how to use LinkedIn because you're talking about your own individual experiences and those sorts of things. So we can actually offer assistance if you create a profile and you make it as best you possibly can, and then we can actually help give you feedback on that as well through appointments. I would assume now, because we are all working from home, we're looking at doing some other online workshops that will be more focused potentially on LinkedIn. But like I said, there's already plenty of resources around that'll help you engage. And also, if you'd like to chat a bit further about, I know there's a question there about sort of maintaining those links once you've got them. We're more than happy to do that one-on-one as well. So is there any other questions that you would like to ask before we wrap up today? Yeah, I can send you a recording. Besides LinkedIn, well, I think the reason I've focused on that at the moment is because we're all in lockdown. So I would encourage you to make the most out of LinkedIn now and maybe start getting on the phone as well to people. And I think you build those connections first initially through LinkedIn, and if you are bold enough, you can actually then start asking for phone numbers and mobile numbers and those sorts of things. And you can actually, I would always encourage the initial approach to be via LinkedIn or written. And then if you can, try and get them on the phone. And I think once you have that verbal communication with them, it's a lot easier then to build and strengthen that particular relationship. Well, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, but if you have a look at how many people are using LinkedIn, I don't think you're ever going to be overwhelmed. People will be overwhelmed if you're constantly trying to sell something to them, but if you're just looking for information, um, generally you will find, particularly Australian business culture, they're happy to provide information depending on the way that you ask. Very rarely, and I don't think if ever, I've ever had a negative response through LinkedIn saying I'm too busy or stop annoying me, those sorts of things. So what I'd encourage you to do, and look, yeah, Sai, I think that's really, really good, because I think the people next to you in terms of in your classes, they may not be helpful to you right this very second, but definitely when you're coming up to graduation, um, and also maybe the first couple of years in industry, when you're starting to think about jumping jumping roles, I think your current cohort or your current students that you're friends with now could be very, very helpful in the future, depending obviously if where you are in the world, if you're in the same country or whatever. I know now, just through my own LinkedIn usage, I have had job opportunities be passed on to me by people I went to university with 10 years, 15 years ago. So definitely start linking with each other if you can. And yeah, you're more than happy to kind of share your LinkedIn profiles with each other now if you'd like. Yeah, it definitely, look, and that's what I'm talking about, Larry. I think the way that we look at our networking here, it's reasonably informal, and it's really what you make it as an individual as well. I find a really reasonably casual approach has really helped me, and it's something that I do almost daily because I'm having to constantly engage with employers as well. And I don't take a formal approach to the way that I deal with employers or the language that I use. That has worked really, really well for me. And like you said, it is very different from many other countries around the world. But LinkedIn usage in Australia, you're almost expecting people to contact you for information. And that's what realistically it's there for. It's not necessarily for recruitment purposes, LinkedIn. It's more so for information sharing and knowledge gaining, I guess. Is there any other questions at all? Yeah, and I think that's what I said that earlier, Larry. It's rather than approaching them for a job or for something for you, it's more about information. It's kind of a bit like the door. I liken it to the door-to-door salesman. So if my first contact with you is saying, "Hey, Lawrence, I want a job with the at UQ. Can you help me?" I'm probably not going to. However, if they say, "Hey, Lawrence, I was looking at your profile. I noticed you're at UQ. You're in the careers development and learning team. I'm studying HR at the moment. I'd really like to get an understanding of how the university works." I would be more than likely to actually respond to that rather than saying, "Hey, how do I get a job at UQ?" So it's more about gaining information first, and then hopefully you're able to generate that connection in the future. And you say, "Hey, we built this relationship. Do you think there's any chance that you could introduce me to your boss or manager?" And start looking for those opportunities that way. Yeah, and I think it's important that you do try it. And I think you might be pleasantly surprised from the feedback that you do get. I was talking to a pharmacy student the other day who happens to be an international student as well, and was feeling, I guess, just as anxious as you are now about approaching industry. And he's managed to have, I think, as of or just before coronavirus started, I think he had actually had 5 or 6 sit-down meetings, so coffees with people and pharmacists and pharmacy owners, just through reaching out through LinkedIn and actually getting on the phone and having a chat to people. I don't think it's necessarily that they avoid. It's more so getting the industry experience. So I think there is also there's a concern with not a concern. The difficulties with some international, like the visa restrictions and those sorts of things. It's a real gamble, I think, for an Australian-based employer to employ an international student straight out of university. The reason I say that is because it's quite a lengthy process for them to offer you sponsorship. It's also very costly. Once that money's paid, they cannot recoup it. So it's more, what I say to international students is you really need to demonstrate that you're willing to build a life in Australia and have done that through the things that you've been involved with. An employer is going to be quite skeptical of your willingness to stay in Australia if you've come and only studied, not necessarily had a part-time job, not done a lot of volunteering and those things. It feels strange contacting me. It does make no sense to me. Well, I think because the reason Deloitte in Australia may not, because it's incredibly competitive, and they have thousands and thousands of Australian-based students vying for their roles as well. What I'd always encourage with the places like Deloitte, obviously, no matter what country Deloitte have a base in, they're going to be flooded with applicants. What I'd encourage you to potentially do is start looking at connecting with people in Deloitte. Obviously, it's a very international company and people move around. I've got 2 friends who work for Deloitte and they've worked in 5 different countries for Deloitte. So what I'd encourage you to do is actually start reaching out to and trying to do some networking with workers in Deloitte that are not senior managers. And get an understanding of recruitment processes, but also see if you can get some contacts within other countries or maybe your home country and those sorts of things as well. It's always good to try and get referrals rather than cold calling. So if you can say you spoke to so-and-so at Brisbane-based Deloitte's office, and they've encouraged me to get in contact with you, it's almost like an introduction. But look, working for Deloitte and PwC as an international student, it's because you have thousands and thousands and thousands of Australian-based students that are wanting that role as well. How to get referrals if we haven't had professional experience here? Well, I think you probably, in terms of gaining that professional experience, it's what sorts of opportunities have you yourself tried to engage with? Have you reached out for, and I'll talk about this now. It's really important, like for an example, and you're all studying different things at the moment, but I would say something for like accounting students. And if they want to go into somewhere like Deloitte, it's really important that you've actually engaged with some other professional experiences in that area. So what I always encourage most students, if not just in international students, but look for not-for-profit organizations, because I would encourage, if you are doing like an accounting degree, every organization, whether not-for-profit, charity, or for-profit or international, they will have an accounts department. And I think it's really important to be able to, rather than volunteering, say, an event, setting up events and setting chairs up and those sorts of things, that you contact these organizations, say, hey, I'm currently a finance or accounting student. I'm wanting to gain some industry experience. I'm happen to be international as well, so wanting to gain some Australian-based experience. I appreciate that you may be a disability organisation or a homeless organisation, but I am doing accounting. I'd love to do some volunteer work in your accounting department. Where can you find those things? So I will actually look at, and all of you can do this if you'd like, look at my community. My community directory. So if you just type in my community directory into, oh, I have spelled that incorrectly. So my community directory, .com or .org.au. It's a website that's got pretty much every single not-for-profit organisation in Australia. And if you say live in Woolloongabba, you can type in Woolloongabba. And if you have a particular interest in, I don't know, animal welfare or working with people with disabilities or something like that, you can actually, oh, thanks, Jamie. You can actually then find out who's local to your area. So you can actually type in, say, youth mental health in Woolloongabba, and it will give you all the youth mental health organisations in Woolloongabba. And you can then approach them and say, hey, I'm an accounting student. Is there any chance I could work for your accounting department? Those sorts of things. There it is. Perfect. Thanks, Larry. Yep, that's it. We also do have quite a few last year, and I'm not sure how it's going to look this year with the coronavirus, but last year we had the Volunteer Expo. A whole heap of organisations there looking for students to volunteer. I'd really encourage any of you looking at volunteering to try and do something that's as closely related to your industry as possible. I know it's a lot of organisations are looking for people to help them raise money or at events and those sorts of things, but try and ask in a way that helps you as well. If you're doing a marketing degree, contact a community-based organisation, say, hey, I've got a background in marketing and social media. Is there any chance I'd be able to do some volunteering once a week and help you with your social media marketing or something like that? So like I said, if you don't ask, you don't get. So this is recorded, so it will be provided to you as well. I'm happy to send around the slides as well. If you haven't registered on Student Hub and you've come today, please register on Student Hub because that's where I'm getting my mailing list from. So I can actually email it to you that way. So I've realized that we are now running overtime. So yeah, if you've got any last minute questions, please feel free to put them up. If not, I'll send this to you shortly and the recording will be made available as well and we'll let you know where that is. Messages, here we go. Sorry, I closed down my chat. Perfect. Well, look, hopefully you've gained something out of that. And I appreciate the whole Zoom workshops are a bit tricky to navigate. I much prefer talking to people face to face and having some conversations with you all. But that said, look, we are having plenty of more opportunities for you to engage with us online. So hopefully keep an eye out for all of those. They'll all be put on Student Hub. We're having an online careers fair in a couple of weeks. We're just trying to piece that together as to what that's going to look like. But that will also be advertised through Student Hub. So just keep checking Student Hub. Yeah, they will be. Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. All right, well, thank you very much for coming in today. I'm going to close today's session. I will probably see you again because we're doing these things throughout or until coronavirus lets us come back to work. So I will be seeing you again, no doubt. So take care, have a good weekend.